It's Wednesday, May 7th, 2025, a rare win for Sanity at the Supreme Court. Trump says China is in trouble, and you won't believe what's racist now. Next on the AM Update.
Never say never. Never say never. What? And they're doing no business right now. And those ships are turning around in the Pacific Ocean.
Congressman, I believe in data, and there is nothing in the data that shows that we are in a recession.
Are judicial impeachments off the table for the rest of this Congress?
No, look, impeachments are never off the table.
I met with Mr. Martin. He seems like a good man. Most of my concerns related to January 6th.
Tariffs will have a particularly negative impact on black households and small businesses in communities of color.
The U.S. Supreme Court issued a temporary victory for the Trump administration on Tuesday on the president's policy of banning tranny members of the military. The court found a lower court was likely wrong in its finding against the Trump administration and blocking the ban on transgender members, so-called. The one-page order from SCOTUS said that the three liberal justices dissented against the majority. Neither the majority nor the dissent provided their reasoning for their opinions. The ruling is not a final, of course, opinion on the issue, but allows the administration to implement the ban as litigation continues. The president had issued that ban on true members of the military in his previous term as well, but former President Joe Biden rescinded that order when he won office. The ban depends on a report from the Pentagon that found true members were a threat to military effectiveness and lethality. Yes, the U.S. federal government, the U.S. military, needed a report to show the obvious truth. More from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and what he's doing at the Department of Defense in a little while. But first, Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister of Canada, went to the White House yesterday. Here he is with President Trump talking about Canada and whether it's still for sale.
Last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together.
And that's a very important thing. But never say never. Never say never.
What?
Yeah, throughout the rest of that conversation, the new tough talking Canadian Prime Minister was basically groveling all over Trump. During that conversation, President Trump was also asked about China and whether there's any deal looming with the CCP.
And they're doing no business right now. And those ships are turning around in the Pacific Ocean. Big turn. Those are big ships. Those ships take about 10 miles to turn. And, we lost $1 trillion to China on trade because of an incompetent president that we had who preceded me, grossly incompetent. You're finding it out more and more now. And by not trading, we're losing nothing. So we're saving $1 trillion. It's a lot. But they want to negotiate and they want to have a meeting, and we'll be meeting with them at the right time.
Attorney General Pam Bondi giveth and taketh away. She announced yesterday the dismantling of a massive drug and weapons trafficking network in New Mexico linked to the Sinaloa cartel.
11.5 kilos of fentanyl, including an astounding approximately 3 million fentanyl pills. The largest seizure in our nation's history. These are the pills in the bags right there. The head of this organization, Sinaloa organization, here in the country illegally, 6 of these guys and women here in the country illegally. His name is Alberto Salazar Amaya. He is the leader, and he was living in Salem, Oregon. With him, they got millions of dollars, cash, cars, but the drugs were in Albuquerque, Phoenix, and Utah. That's how insulated these drug dealer cartel leaders make themselves.
Yeah, as a part of that raid, they seized $610,000 in cash, 49 firearms, including ghost guns and modified weapons, 396 kilograms of fentanyl pills, 11.5 kilograms fentanyl powder, and the list goes on and on. Kilos of cocaine, heroin, and other substances as well. Pam Bondi taketh away. It was reported this week the Trump Department of Justice, led by Bondi, filed a motion to dismiss Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey's lawsuit against the Food and Drug Administration. Bailey was arguing against the FDA's approval of sending via mail the abortifacient, that's the baby-killing drug, mifepristone. Now, Bailey, along with 2 other states, that'd be Kansas and Idaho, those attorneys general, he filed this lawsuit after a group of pro-life doctors tried to do the same thing, arguing that the FDA is overstepping its bounds in approving medication like that, abortifacients, from being sent via mail. Well, those doctors were denied standing, and now the Trump administration, or at least the Trump DOJ, I should say, is making the same argument against these attorneys general, saying they don't have standing. So Pam Bondi giveth and taketh away. That latter story is really, really a head-scratcher. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent again poured cold water on the notion of a Trump session. Testifying in front of a House Appropriations Subcommittee on Tuesday, he said the numbers just aren't there for this so-called Trump session.
Congressman, I believe in data, and there is nothing in the data that shows that we are in a recession. As a matter of fact, the jobs report has surprised to the upside.
The negative growth in the second quarter, which is, I suppose, the traditional definition of a recession, would you agree that we are in that recession of which the president speaks?
Congressman, these economic numbers are noisy and subject to substantial revision. So I, having looked at a detailed analysis, would believe that the first quarter GDP would be revised upward. And I would also, with regards to your remark about where we were last year, we were spending 6.7%. We had a 6.7% fiscal deficit, the largest we've ever had during peacetime or non-recessionary times. So the easy thing would be to keep spending, to keep the economy running on an unsustainable path of government spending.
Yeah, you heard a line of questioning there from Maryland's Congressman Steny Hoyer on the House Appropriations Committee. And once again, you're reminded when you hear members of Congress speak how utterly and thoroughly unimpressive they are. It's like Scott Bessent, my favorite homosexual economist. It's like he had to reprogram his brain in order to keep up with the slow pace of Congress. And he says the numbers just aren't there in terms of a recession, and says the United States is taking the hard road, but the necessary road in terms of actually reprivatizing the economy. A federal appeals court rejected this week a request by President Trump's administration to allow it to revoke the temporary legal status of 400,000 Cuban, Haitians, and Nicaraguans, along with a few Venezuelans, living in the United States. The Boston-based First U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals declined to put on hold a judge's order halting the Department of Homeland Security's move to cut short a 2-year parole program granted to illegals under Joe Biden. Back in Congress, House Speaker Mike Johnson was asked.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to follow up on your comments about Congressman Issa's bill on judges. So are judicial impeachments off the table for the rest of this Congress?
No, look, impeachments are never off the table if it's merited, but
Then freaking do it. There have been about, 50 dozen merited cases for impeachment so far during the Trump administration, during his first 100 days and then some, where federal judges from the 666th District of Siberia, which is not even in this country, have chimed in, issuing universal injunctions. That in and of itself, those cases in and of themselves, are more than enough justification for impeachment of judges. So there's House Speaker Johnson saying, no, impeachment of these judges is never off the table, then freaking do something about it. Speaking of somebody who should be impeached or removed, or whatever the process is for a senator, it's Thom Tillis, who's holding up President Trump's nominee for the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Ed Martin, who is a solid individual. Here is North Carolina Senator Tillis's explanation for why he's not supporting Trump's nominee.
He is, I don't believe he's being advanced to the markup. And I met with Mr. Martin. He seems like a good man. Most of my concerns related to January 6th, and he built a compelling case on some of the 15-12 prosecutions that were probably heat of the moment bad decisions, but where we probably have a difference is I think anybody that breached the perimeter should have been in prison for some period of time. Whether it's 30 days or 3 years is debatable, but I have no tolerance for anybody.
So that is a Republican senator from North Carolina, Thom Tillis, saying he just overtly believes that Trump supporters should be in prison just for entering the Capitol. Just for entering the Capitol. For breaching the perimeter. It's their house anyway. It's their building anyway. But he thinks Trump supporters should be in prison, and that's why he's not supporting Ed Martin Cooper, U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. When we come back, fires at the University of Washington as Antifa takes over. You'll never believe what's racist now. And Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is taking a little bit of a victory lap along with announcing a new policy I think could have lasting ramifications. That's coming up next. Yes, the sound of a literal dumpster fire as Antifa marches in the background at the University of Washington in Seattle. Multiple fires were set by Antifa militants at Washington's campus in Seattle earlier this week. A group of Black Bloc Antifa occupied the Interdisciplinary Engineering Building and blockaded the doors. The building opened just a few weeks ago, and the $100 million price tag was funded by private donors, taxpayers, a federal grant, Amazon, T-Mobile, and Boeing. Activists blocked streets with bike racks and dumpsters and set them on fire. The fires were set around 10:30 p.m. local time on Monday night, and neither police nor firefighters were on the scene as the fire grew. The university had lost complete control of the campus. The Antifa radicals seizing this brand new engineering building demanded the university reject any donations from the Boeing Corporation and terminating any investments therein. Activists also demanded that Boeing executives and employees be prohibited from teaching classes or creating any curriculum. Wow, Boeing is getting a chicken wing after all the work they did on DEI over the past several years? Color me shocked. You'll never guess what is racist now. Actually, you probably will. You could probably just point to any random page in the dictionary, and I guarantee you, for the most part, there's going to be some entry online about how whatever word you look up is racist somehow. Here's a story from a local news outlet in Chicago about the tariff war.
Economists say tariffs will have a particularly negative impact on Black households and small businesses in communities of color.
I think the risk is real.
But do not fear. That's the message from Pastor Raymond Thomas, co-founder and dean at the Joseph School of Business. While teaching practical business solutions in a faith-based environment, the Christian Business School has created its own partner network by trying to help insulate small businesses in Black and brown neighborhoods from the tariff shock and economic uncertainty.
Because of our international presence, right, we now have opportunity to create platforms like we have what we call a global partner network, again, where we can develop relationships, again, in Nigeria, in Tanzania, in South Africa.
The lower third on this story says tariffs impacting small Black-owned businesses in the Chicago area. Next week, it's going to be tariffs are misogynistic. It's Rush Limbaugh's old line. Women and minorities hardest hit. Trump ends the de minimis loophole. Women and minorities hardest hit. Yes, tariffs are now racist. I guarantee you pretty much any word in the English language you can look up online, and you can find a story about how whatever you're reading about is racist. And now here's this. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is unveiling a new policy I think could have some lasting ramifications.
We're back with more DOD reforms. This one is General and Flag Officer Reductions. That's the official title. My title is Less Generals, More GIs. It's a historic one, and it's in keeping with President Trump's commitment to achieving peace through strength. We're going to shift resources from bloated headquarters elements to our warfighters. Let's take a bit of a trip down memory lane. In history, when we were fighting across the globe during World War II, we had a force that was 12 million strong. For that 12 million man element, we had 17 4- and 5-star generals. Today, we have 2.1 million service members with 44 4-star and flag officers. So it used to be a ratio of 1 general to 6,000 troops. Today, it's 1 general to 1,400. More generals and admirals does not equal more success. Now, this is not a slash and burn exercise meant to punish high-ranking officers. Nothing could be further from the truth. This has been a deliberative process, working with the Joint Chiefs of Staff with one goal: maximizing strategic readiness and operational effectiveness by making prudent reductions in the general and flag officer ranks. So there's 2 phases here. Phase 1, we're looking at our current service structure. And in phase 2, it's a strategic review of the unified command, plan. Now, this is going to be, we think, the most comprehensive review since the Goldwater-Nichols Defense Reorganization Act of 1986. That was a generational change in combat command structures, planning, training, geographic areas of responsibility, mission, and operational responsibilities. So, as I said, it's going to happen in 2 phases. The result of phase 1 is a minimum of 20% reduction of 4-star and flag officers for active duty elements, and a minimum of 20% reduction of general and flag officers in the National Guard Bureau. Phase 2 will produce a minimum of an additional 10% reduction of overall general and flag officers throughout the DoD, in conjunction with a realignment of the Unified Command Plan. It's going to be done carefully, but it's going to be done expeditiously. We confront a complex and evolving threat environment. We cannot afford to wait. We got to be lean and mean. And in this case, it means general officer reductions.
So that is Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth introducing what he's dubbing his less generals, more GIs policy. And finally, our analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. I mentioned yesterday, not in passing, but overtly, how one of the most poignant changes to this country that President Barack Obama attempted to make, and I think successfully so in a lot of ways, was on the issue of race. He was the divider in chief, and that's not just a fancy, a cute little moniker for him. He set out to divide us, and I think he did successfully. That was one of the most poignant accomplishments of his presidency over 8 years. One subtle way, and this has been remarked before, but one subtle way that he remade the government, this country, in his own image was what he did with the military. That was really the genesis of the last institution in our country that had not been even breached, I would argue, before Barack Obama, not even breached necessarily by the wokeness or even left-leaning ideology. He completely terraformed the military. And he did so by the very, let's just call it, intentional picking of 4-star and 5-star generals. Now, it sounds like Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, along with President Trump, is trying to do the inverse. You look at what the Supreme Court ruled yesterday as well, getting the troons out of the military. You look at policies like this. There have been discussions about completely revamping the service academies. Those are all incredibly necessary and incredibly important things. And you look at the recruiting numbers as well. You can't just ignore those. There are more people, I think, who are more willing to sign up, serve, and maybe even die for this country in just the last few months than in the last 4 years on average, week by week, rolling average, whatever you want to call it. I think the reason why you've seen consistent, persistent, right on the clock, right on schedule attacks on Pete Hegseth is because whatever our opponents are, whomever they are, whatever the enemy is, they see what he is trying to do, how Trump is using him. They see that as a real, lasting threat. That's why he's attacked. I don't believe it's just because he's an easy target. He is attacked consistently. It's because he is a real threat to the status quo. It's kind of the genesis of the question I asked this week for our poll of the week. Who do you think in terms of Trump's picks, various nominations so far, who do you think poses or is doing the most lasting damage to the swamp? I gave you 3 options. You can check those out at Real AM Update on X. Look for the pinned poll. 3 options as far as who you think so far is doing the most lasting damage to the swamp. That's our poll of the week. Hope you have a wonderful Wednesday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.